I was halfway through dinner when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Jensen from across the street, her voice shaking. "You need to come home right now. Something's happened to your shed." My heart stopped. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, a pit forming in my stomach. What could have possibly gone wrong? That shed wasn't just some backyard storage. It was my sanctuary, my place to heal, to remember, and to keep a part of my past alive. As I pulled into the driveway, the scene hit me like a blow. The shed door was smashed open, tools scattered everywhere, broken locks dangled uselessly. The HOA crew was still there, frantic and scrambling, faces pale and eyes wide. They had no idea what they walked into, because that shed wasn't just wood and nails. It was a veterans trap training site, a place where I tested non-lethal defenses, built to protect my peace of mind and myself. And now, that peaceful retreat had become a battlefield. I'm a retired Army veteran, served for over 20 years, and after all the deployments, the noise and the chaos, I wanted nothing more than peace. That's why I moved here, to this quiet suburb, where the streets are lined with neat houses, trimmed lawns, and a calm that I hadn't felt in years. At first, it was everything I hoped for. Neighbors waved hello, kids played outside, and the sun set quietly behind the trees. But not long after I settled in, the trouble began. See, this place has a homeowners association, the HOA. They're the kind of folks who like rules, lots of them. Rules about how your yard should look, what colors you can paint your house, even how your mailbox should be styled. Nothing too crazy, I guess, but enough to make life a little less free. My problem was the shed in my backyard. It didn't fit their idea of uniform. While others had small plain garden sheds, mine was different. Not because it was fancy, but because it was functional. Military functional. That shed was built to be my personal retreat. Not just a place to store tools or old camping gear. It was where I recreated some of the training exercises I'd used overseas. I set up non-lethal traps, tripwires, that would trigger noise alarms, flashbang training devices, that only startled but never hurt, nets that could safely immobilize. It was a way to keep my skills sharp, sure, but more importantly, it was therapy. After years of serving in dangerous places, I needed something to help me deal with the stress and memories. Working on those setups gave me focus, it gave me peace, but the HOA didn't see it that way. To them, my shed was a nuisance. It was military looking and out of place. Some neighbors complained that it looked like a mini fort, and the HOA started sending letters. First, polite warnings about the shed's appearance, then fines for violating community standards. I tried explaining, but they didn't want to hear it. To them, the shed was a problem. To me, it was my sanctuary. I kept the lights low, kept the traps harmless, and tried to stay under the radar. But the tension grew. I could feel their eyes watching, waiting for a chance to make me remove it. I wasn't about to give up on the one place that helped me keep my sanity. The warnings started out small. A polite letter slipped under my door, telling me the shed didn't match the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. Then, a few days later, another letter arrived, this one more serious, warning me that if I didn't remove or modify the shed, fines would begin to pile up. At first, I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. I reached out to the HOA board. I explained that the shed wasn't just a garden shed. It was something I built from my own well-being, a way to cope after my years in the Army. I tried to assure them that everything inside was safe, nothing dangerous, just harmless training equipment and setups. They didn't care. The letters kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. Complaints from neighbors piled up. Some said it looked like a military outpost. Others claimed it was scary, or too loud because of my training alarms. The HOA declared that my shed was a code violation, and demanded it be removed immediately. I knew their rules had recently changed, but my shed was built years before. Technically, it was grandfathered in, but the HOA wasn't interested in technicalities. They wanted it gone. I tried to ignore the warnings. I had a right to my property, and I wasn't about to give up my sanctuary over petty complaints. But with tension rising, I decided to take precautions. I installed a security system around the shed. Cameras pointed at every entrance, motion sensors and passive trip alerts that would notify me if anyone got too close. None of these were weapons, just measures to protect what was mine. The trip alerts were designed to trigger harmless sounds, whistles or alarms, that would scare off intruders without causing harm. It was all about protection, not confrontation. For a while things quieted down. The HOA seemed to back off, maybe realizing I wasn't going anywhere. But then one afternoon, I noticed something strange. The cameras had gone dark. I checked the system from my phone. No signal, no footage, just dead silence. At first, I thought it was a glitch, maybe a power outage, or a technical fault. But when I went outside, the cameras themselves looked tampered with. The wires were cut. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were messing with. That night, I stayed awake, listening. Every sound made me jump. The shed felt vulnerable for the first time since I built it. And then the unthinkable happened. It was late afternoon when my phone rang again. This time, it was Mark, one of my neighbors, a guy I trusted. His voice was tense, almost breathless. "Hey man, you need to get home now. The HOA sent a crew to your place. They're trying to tear down the shed." I dropped everything and sped back. My mind raced with questions. How did they get the guts to do this? And what would I find? As I pulled up to my house, chaos was everywhere. Voices shouting, tools clattering, and water spraying from a garden hose that had been left running, soaking the front yard. I saw a man hobbling away, clutching his leg, grimacing in pain. Other men scrambled inside my backyard, clearly nervous. I froze. Something was wrong. I rushed to the backyard gate and pushed it open. The scene that greeted me was worse than I imagined. My shed was battered, the door hanging off its hinges. Tools, wires, and parts of my traps lay scattered across the grass. But that wasn't the worst part. Several of the traps I'd set up were triggered. Loud noise alarms blared, piercing through the air. A flashbang training device exploded with a blinding pop and a burst of light, designed only to startle. But it hit several of the crew square in the face. One of them stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. Then, a tripwire had set off a piercing siren, echoing off the neighborhood houses. And just as I was taking it all in, a net launcher, something I'd built to safely immobilize an intruder, fired off, wrapping a man's leg in a thick nylon net. The HOA crew was panicking, shouting at each other. "He set a booby trap," one yelled, eyes wide with fear. "This isn't safe. Someone call the cops." I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "Those aren't booby traps. They're harmless defensive setups. None of them can hurt anyone. I warned you. You ignored the signs." The police arrived quickly. Neighbors had already called them, worried about the commotion. As the officers took statements, the HOA reps insisted I'd set dangerous traps meant to harm people. They accused me of criminal behavior, but I wasn't worried, because I had something they didn't. My backup security system had kept running, hidden cameras capturing everything. I pulled out my phone and showed the footage to the officers. Every moment from before the break-in to the chaos that followed. There they were, the HOA crew, cutting my lock, ignoring the no trespassing signs, stepping right into every trap I'd set up. The alarms, the flashbang, the siren, even the net launcher, all harmless but effective, and clearly triggered by the intruders themselves. The police watched, silent at first, then nodding. One officer looked at the HOA rep and said, "You don't have permission to enter private property without a warrant. Breaking the lock, that's trespassing, and your contractors got themselves caught in these setups because they ignored warnings." The HOA rep stammered, trying to explain, but it was clear the evidence was against them. I stood there, a mix of relief and anger swirling inside me. They had no right to do this, no right to invade my space, damage my property, or threaten my peace, but they did it anyway, and now, they'd have to answer for it. After the break-in, I expected things to calm down, but instead, the HOA doubled down. They tried to press charges against me, saying I had set dangerous traps and threatened their crew. They painted me as a troublemaker, someone who couldn't follow community rules. But the truth was exactly the opposite. Everything I had was on my private property, behind locked doors and clear warning signs. I never wanted anyone stepping inside without permission. The traps were meant to protect my space, not to harm anyone. The HOA crew broke in. They cut my lock. They ignored every warning sign I put up. The footage made it clear. There was no doubt about what happened. The police watched it again and again. One officer told me, "You had every right to protect your property." They didn't. The HOA's case fell apart quickly. The charges against me were dropped. Instead, the HOA found themselves under investigation. The authorities looked into their actions for trespassing and property damage. Some neighbors started talking. The story spread through the community. People were surprised to learn the HOA had acted without permission. Many were upset that their association would treat one of their own this way, especially a veteran. I got calls from neighbors offering support. Some even apologized for not understanding before. But the HOA board was stubborn. Some members tried to defend their actions, saying they were just enforcing rules. Still, the police had the video. The evidence was clear. As the investigation unfolded, the HOA's reputation took a hit. Questions were raised about how they handled conflicts, and whether they had overstepped their authority. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted my shed back, and my peace restored. In the end, the HOA had to face consequences for their reckless decisions. Trespassing, damaging private property, and causing unnecessary chaos. It was a hard lesson for them, and for me, it was a reminder that sometimes standing your ground is the only way to protect what matters. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, a new twist hit the neighborhood like a thunderclap. It turned out the contractor the HOA hired to handle the shed situation wasn't a real contractor at all. Not licensed, not insured, just some handyman a board member's cousin knew from a few towns over. I couldn't believe it. The HOA had put my property and their own crew in danger by hiring someone so unqualified. And then things got worse. The worker who got caught in the net launcher and injured during the break-in decided to sue. But surprisingly, he didn't sue me. He sued the HOA. He claimed the HOA forced him into a dangerous situation without proper training or safety measures. The HOA scrambled to cover it up, trying to shift blame and hush things up quietly. They told residents it was a misunderstanding, and tried to sweep the whole thing under the rug. But word travels fast in a neighborhood like this. More and more residents started asking questions. How could the HOA ignore proper procedures? How did they think it was okay to send an unlicensed handyman to break into someone's property? Why hadn't they respected my warnings or legal rights? Conversations sparked at neighborhood barbecues and meetings. People who had been silent before began to speak up. The story snowballed into a full-blown community scandal. Some neighbors even started siding with me, the veteran who'd been fighting for his rights all along. The HOA board was under fire, not just for breaking the rules, but for endangering people and damaging trust. It was ironic, really. The people who claimed to protect the neighborhood ended up tearing it apart. And in the middle of it all, I just wanted to keep my shed, my peace, and the quiet I had fought so hard to find. In the end, I kept my shed. It stood exactly where it always had, battered, but unbroken. The fallout from the break-in didn't fade quietly. The scandal spread faster than anyone expected. It wasn't just whispers between neighbors anymore. It became the center of every conversation on the block. People started attending HOA meetings who'd never shown up before. They came with questions, with concerns, and most of all with frustration. They weren't just upset about what happened to me. They were angry that it could happen to anyone. The pressure built quickly, and the HOA board couldn't handle it. Most of the members resigned over the course of just a few weeks. One stepped down during a meeting mid-sentence. Another left a resignation note in everyone's mailbox and disappeared. They couldn't face the consequences of their actions. Or maybe they just didn't want to admit they were wrong. Either way, the community demanded change. And this time, they actually got it. New faces came in to replace the old guard. People from the neighborhood who actually took the time to talk to residents before making decisions. People who didn't think authority meant control, but responsibility. They listened, they asked questions, they cared, and surprisingly, they reached out to me. They invited me to join a committee they were forming, one that would focus on community safety and homeowner rights. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to say yes. I didn't trust easily anymore, and I had every reason to walk away from anything with HOA in the title. But after thinking it over, I realized maybe this was the exact reason I needed to say yes, so I did. We started meeting every other week. Small group discussions, real conversations, not just policy talk. And slowly, we began rewriting the way things worked around here. We built new guidelines together, ones that respected the neighborhood's shared vision, but also protected individual freedoms. We made sure nobody else would ever be punished for having a shed that helped them feel safe. Nobody else would be ignored just because they were different. Through all of it, I kept coming back to that shed in my backyard. When I first built it, I thought it was just for me, a place to get away, to stay grounded, to breathe again after years of holding it all in. But somewhere along the way, it became something else, a symbol, a quiet reminder that standing your ground isn't just about guarding a building or a piece of property. It's about guarding your dignity, your history, your right to live in peace, even if the world around you doesn't always understand it. Maybe the shed wasn't just therapy for me. Maybe it fixed something bigger too. Sometimes, people think they know better, until they step into a world they don't understand. This story is a reminder that respect and understanding matter more than rules alone. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more. And if you know someone who needs a good reminder about respecting boundaries, please share this with them. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.